Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I must actually really thank Mr. Zondi and Wayne for the nice introduction, because I think we must definitely have been in codes in terms of what we're trying to say. I think it really fits in very well with what we are doing in the way that we are doing things. What I'm specifically going to talk to you about today is about what we are doing in terms of finding technology solutions in the securing our borders environment. But it really goes much further than that in terms of the approach that we use specifically, in terms of the experimentation and what we're doing. Why we want to present directly together is much of what I'm doing is almost setting the scene, whereas Priyash will give you much more real practical examples of exactly what we've done. Okay, so let's go. Some background on our border environment. We have a coastal border of about 2,700 kilometers. And if you speak to any of the yachting environment people, they say it's the worst part that you can find almost in terms of coastline. Really bad weather, but a nice place to have a ship in around. But the terrestrial border is about 5,200 kilometers. So what are some of the problems that we are experiencing? We have a variety of border-related crimes. A lot of them are illegal crossings, a lot of them are poaching and smuggling. We also sit with the classical problem that we see a lot of places in Africa, that there are borders that was created artificially that actually crosses across people that used to live in a specific area. If somebody outside of Africa decided that the border must go there, and they didn't think that that border goes right through one particular community. And then you get this kind of behavior where we say, but why? Why must that border be there? So they just take off the borders. Because they don't really fit into that society. So our problem is not purely in that sense technology-wise, but also in how do we deal with the societal problems around that, which is not that easy to do. So finding focus, what we try to do is, and this really started when we started preparing for the 2010 World Cup, is to say, how do we find a focus? Because there's so much that we can do in an engineering and technology environment. Where do we start? What are the things that we can do that will really make a difference? And the only real way for us to find out what makes the real difference is if we get engaged into real environments. If we start looking at what's really happening in operations and start engaging with that. So we started a process that we call experimentation in terms of getting to understanding the problem from the Defence Forces side. I'm an engineer, I like to play. So, but playing with just everything doesn't get us anywhere. So trying to really understand what are the Defence Force problems, taking some of that stuff into our environments, into our labs, and then getting it into the field. So the focus of our process, it was developed by us, and to some extent it's very much based on a lot of the experimentation approach that the US uses, but we can't go to that extent. They have lots more money than us and a lot more people. So we really had to scale down in terms of how do we go around it. How it happens in that experimentation process is we try to develop very specific objectives. So we would say there's a very specific problem, like we'll see with Priyash's talk about rhino poaching, and say, what are the objectives that you try to solve on there? So typically we've had about 5 fairly biggish experiments, and typically we have in there, we start with about 100 objectives. And you have to scale that down, try to understand what are the real big ones. And we normally end up with about 20 or 30 objectives for one experiment to try and deal with. And those objectives can really be at different things, from what technology will specifically work, down to what sort of a process will work, what sort of information do we need to exchange, what interaction with what other departments do we have. Because border environment, typically, there's a huge amount of departments together. I think if you count, it sometimes goes up to about 30 departments that are involved in border security. So it really becomes a very messy environment in terms of how do we deal with people, how we talk together. We try to target very technical solutions and not try everything out. So we really say what are the issues that we need to deal with this specific objective. And there's a lot of parties involved, like I said now. This is a photograph of one of our macadamia experiments. We had Defence Force, we had police, we had industry, we had CSIR, we had a whole bunch of people there that participated in that process, which really worked well. You cannot deal with border security environment purely from a police or military environment. It just can't be done. It is a multi-department problem that you have to deal with. So one of the things that we really learned in this process is you have to go from the lab to the real world. And one of the other lessons that we really learned is that we have to do small-scale lab experiments, with the main reason is what does not work in the lab does not go into the field. It's no use taking something that's not working in the lab into the field. We learned that lesson also in the World Cup environment, where our first experiment took us about a week and a half to get everything running, and we had about 3 days to experiment. Then we said, no, this can't work like this. So we started the whole process of saying, if it doesn't work in the lab, we don't take it. I think our second one, we ended up with taking maybe 3 or 4 days setting up, and we had about a week and a half to experiment. I think the macadamia one was about a setup of 1 day and 2 weeks of experiment. So I think really has helped quite a lot in terms of saying, don't take everything you can to the experiment. And that's also one of the problems that we sometimes run into with. It's nice to have a lot of industry players that wants to participate. But if they can't verify their solutions beforehand to some extent in our lab environment, we can't take them with. Otherwise, we really end up with trying to make the stuff work for 2 weeks long and not getting to the real problems. Because especially also in the environment where we have to take it to the real life field, a lot of the focus in the real life experiments in the field conditions is not necessarily around the technology. It's around the processes of how do we deal with the problem. And what are the processes? What are the sort of information flows that has to happen? Now, I think we've experienced it as well. You can have a very good plan, you can have very good doctrine, a nice process, it lasts about a day, and then it changes. So you have to be very agile in that way. So the focus is a lot on the process side when we get into the real life environment. Another thing that's really important to understand is there's a big difference between an exercise for the military and an experiment. In an exercise, your job is to go and test what you already know. Do as you've been taught and see if you actually learned what you were doing, see if the doctrine that I've been taught works. That's the main objective for an exercise. Experiment, so exercise, stay inside the box and don't change the box. Experiment right the other way around. The experiment's job is to say, how can I squeeze this box? How big can I make the box? How can I change the color of the box? How can I make the box round? Totally really trying and say, more looking towards what is feasible than just trying to confirm that I've already done. So I think that to some extent takes us out of preparing for last war in terms of trying to get how can we change the last war's doctrine to work in this current war. So I think that's part of what we try to do with the experiments, is to really see what are the processes that works there. So it's not so much based. Now we run into a lot of problems in that sense as well, because sometimes we use current systems in our experiments, and then we get the feedback and saying, but no, you can't do that. That system was not designed to do that, and you must follow the doctrine. An example is one of the tactical intelligence systems. If you want to deploy it according to doctrine, you need 60 people. In the border environment, you have 4. So you have to deal with that. You can't do everything. So that's how that works. We had a Maritime Scenario, which was our last fairly big experiment. It was in the Saldanha area. I think it was probably the biggest experiment deployment that DPSS has ever had. In terms of almost all of our competence areas was involved, where we had optronic systems, we had radar systems, we had CSIR command and control systems, we had networks, we had special forces equipment, we had a whole bunch of equipment and stuff and approaches in there. So some of the ideas around there was, what you also do with the experiments is, you have a sort of a scenario and then you create what we call injects, or a simulated event that happens. And then you have to deal with that event that happens. And sometimes in the real life we have real experiments, real things that happen. Like I think it was at the macadamia one, where we saw a strange behavior from a truck, and she followed it, and we got the police involved, and they went and they looked at the truck, and they were offloading milk at a school. But the behavior of the truck beforehand was very strange. So that's something that happens in real life also as part of the experiment. So you have this mixed girl of real life events and injects that you put into the experiment. Try and go there. Interesting there is, for that specific experiment, the preparation time was 8 months. And I would say probably 80% of that is to trying to understand what are the problems that are being experienced, reducing the set of 130 objectives to something that we can manage in 2 weeks' time, which is like maybe 20 or 30. So that the process that we work there is that we have very, very good interaction with the Defence Force and with some of the other departments, where we almost meet at a weekly basis and going through and say, what's next, what must we change, what are the real drivers, what are the real priority problems that we need to try and solve. So it takes a long time to prepare almost for these things. We get some feedback from the Defence Force saying they want us to do these kind of experiments 4 times a year. I think we have 2 problems in that sense is you can't fit 4 times 8 months in 1 year. And we don't necessarily have all the funding to be able us to do this kind of experiment. I think the other thing that works really well with the experiments is it's not one project that does it. It's not an acquisition project that does an experiment to test each equipment. It's not one department that try and sort of a process. I think I'm not sure, I didn't count the number of projects involved in the last one, but it's 8 or more different projects that actually partially fund some of the elements. So it's also normally not one funding source to do an experiment. Otherwise you just can't afford to do it. It's just too much money. What's also nice is sometimes we get really, really good participation by the Defence Force, where the Air Force actually, for the macadamia one, changed their deployment for one of their exercises to go inside with the experiment. So we had a huge deployment from the Air Force that then formed part of the experiment after the exercise, which was really useful. So what are the real results afterwards? We then evaluate all our technical objectives and things like that. It helps us in planning our future experiments better. A lot of the outcomes actually goes around recommendations around the objectives. It can be technology objectives, it can be process objectives. We've confirmed certain acquisition ideas saying, please, I want to do this, I want to deploy this system in the field for all of the border security. Now it's much easier to motivate to do that if you can say, here's the proof that it actually really works. We've tried it, we've tested it, it works in real life. It's not just talk. So that's a big benefit of getting experiments. We've done 5 major experiments in about 4 years, and I think we've initiated quite a few doctrine changes and influenced some acquisitions with the experiment process. I think at the moment I'm quite excited about where we are with the experiment process. It also creates a lot of momentum if you can create an event of a specific time and say we're working towards that. It seems to energize people to work towards a specific event rather than just talking about stuff. And I think that's my point.